Good morning, everyone. Keto Coffee cheers. Really excited to be talking to you guys today about this topic because the whole idea with intermittent fasting, you guys have probably already seen a lot of really great results. This is something very common that people see, like deep bloating results, how they've started to lose weight. But a really common thing I get asked a lot is how you can actually continue seeing results, and if it's something that is like too good to be true, and if you need to be like switching things up. So today I really wanted to be diving into just a lot of strategies that you can use to make intermittent fasting sustainable and a tool that you can use and have it adjusted to your life and where you're at in your wellness journey. So I'll be going into a lot of different subtopics today, but one overarching theme that I want you guys to just know and remember throughout this is that one of the main secrets to using intermittent fasting is knowing when to fast and when you shouldn't. So just keep that in mind. We're going to be going into a lot of these details shortly, but first things first, guys. Keto Coffee cheers. I already see a lot of you guys in the chat. So hi, Colin. Hi, Camille. Hi, Paige. Keto Coffee cheers. Oh, loving these lives during the challenge. Thank you, Erica. Good morning, Darla. Hi, Mary. All right. Lots of people in here already. Great. Awesome, guys. Okay. So if you are new here for whatever reason, probably not if you guys are tuning in for this live stream, but if you're new here, my name's Autumn, certified clinical nutritionist with my master's in nutrition, human performance. You guys have probably heard me say that a million times. So you know all of that already. But with these live streams, we're doing this as like a weekly live stream for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge to provide you guys more information, a sense of community as well. I mean, I've seen a lot of the same people in the chat, which has been amazing. A lot of you guys talking back and forth, which has just been really fun to see that. So I've been really loving these live streams throughout the challenge. I'll be doing them again for the summer live streams, summer challenge as well. More details on that to come. Very, very excited about that one. But for today's topic, we're going to be going into how you can use intermittent fasting sustainably, strategies you can use to actually continue seeing results, not just for 4 weeks, but for life. So remember that first really important thing to keep in mind is that you really need to make sure that you know when you should be fasting and when you shouldn't. I have, because this is like a big topic to be going over today, I have all of my notes here so I don't go too far off topic, but I wanted to be able to cover a lot of these strategies that you can use to make intermittent fasting sustainable. So the first thing to really go over is knowing when you should fast longer, knowing when you should keep your fast shorter, or even knowing when you should be using, or if you should be using at all, the extended fast. That's something that I've seen a lot of questions about, especially in the Facebook group, the private AN Facebook group. Just trying to figure out like, okay, should you be fasting longer? Should you be doing like 24 or 48 hour fast or 3-day water fast? So let's dive first into that, because that's the first really sustainable question to answer is what frequency should you be fasting and should you be changing that up? I actually just talked about this a little bit in detail in, I think it was last Thursday's video, but just to expand on that, first things first, when you should be fasting longer. So if you've been thinking about like, should you be upping your fast from 12 hours a day or 14 hours a day to 16 or 18 or 20 hours a day? For this one, we're not talking about like the 24, 48 hour, we're talking about those shorter daily fasts and whether or not you should extend those. There's really a couple of reasons why you would want to have a slightly longer fast each day. First one is gut health. So you guys know intermittent fasting, great tool to help increase the migrating motor complex activity, flush out the left behind food and bacteria, and just help to clean out the GI tract, reduce inflammation, and help with gut health. So with longer fasts, and especially with true fasts, this is the one time that it's really important to actually not have keto coffee during your fasted state. With having slightly longer fasts, that just increases the amount of time that you can be upregulating that migrating motor complex, increasing the amount of time that your body has to actually sweep out left behind food and bacteria and help clean out your gut. So if you are really focused on really healing your gut, that would be a time when you would want to have slightly longer fasts. So like, let's say you are currently inching your way up, you're at like 14-hour fast right now, or you start off with 12, but you really want to maximize that gut healing portion. That's when it would be a good idea to slightly bump up your fasting period to maybe 14 hours, 16 hours, whatever it might be. The other main time that you would want to is if, gosh, guys, I just noticed how crazy my hair is right now. Sorry about that. The other main time that you might want to is if you are really addressing insulin resistance. So if you have found that you have some level of insulin resistance and you want to try and get that insulin level down to help make sure that you're not contributing further to that insulin resistance, that's a time as well when you might want slightly longer daily fasts. Still not talking about extended fast here, but going from like, let's say 14-hour to 18-hour fast. Reason why is because when you are in that fasted state is when insulin levels are the lowest point it's going to be. So even if you are eating really nothing that's going to stimulate insulin, there's still going to be a slight insulin response when we're eating. So if you are really addressing insulin resistance, that's when it would be a good time to be having those slightly longer fasts. Now let's get into extended fasts, because that is something that is a big question. And I think that it does have its areas where it shines. So when I'm talking about extended fast, I'm talking about like 24-hour, 48-hour, 72-hour. There are even longer water fasts that can be done, and some people will do them. But what I've seen is that the vast majority of people really either shouldn't be doing them or are doing them wrong. So a good time to be using them is if you are if you're really addressing the insulin resistance or really addressing that gut healing aspect of health and wellness. But in these circumstances, especially if you're on medications, especially if those medications have anything to do with blood sugar control, thyroid, that's when it would be essential that you're actually doing this with a doctor who can walk you through some type of more therapeutic protocol with fasting, because the amount of medications or the timing of those medications greatly going to change, greatly going to vary when you are using extended fast. So if you are going to use that, it really should only be for that insulin resistance type of issue, or for really, really addressing extreme gut healing. And if you are doing that, and if you are using any type of medications, really must be done with a doctor. And the times that you shouldn't use it is after you had a treat. So this is something that I've seen some people will use this as, like, let's say yesterday being Easter, maybe you had a lot of Easter chocolate. I don't know, maybe like you had a lot of sugar, or you had a lot of mimosas, whatever it might be. And you feel that you need to fast right after that, have an extended fast to just clear the system. This is really the worst time to be doing this. And we're going to be going over treat meal structure later on in this live stream. But we'll get into the details of why this is not a good time to be using it. But just remember, you shouldn't be using these extended fasts if you are going to use them as a way to recover from some type of cheat or treat meal. It's just going to make things worse and more difficult for you later on. So I will be getting more into that in a bit, but I want to get next into when you should have a shorter fast. So shorter fasts are also important to remember as well, because the main reason why you'd want to make your fast shorter, so basically opening up your eating window, is if you're not getting enough nutrients for your needs. Now, there's a variety of reasons why this might be. If you're an athlete, that's a really big one. So athletes, we've talked a lot about this on this channel, and you don't even necessarily have to be like college level or professional athlete, but if you're a casual athlete, like training for a triathlon or a marathon, you have a lot higher protein needs, especially, but also just nutrient needs in general. It can be very hard to get that during a smaller window. Doesn't mean that you can't be having some type of fasting period. Again, we'll have another strategy we're going to talk about for this in a bit as well. But it shouldn't be a longer fast, because you really need to be focusing on getting enough nutrients for your needs. The other time when nutrient needs probably aren't being met if you are using fasting is if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. So there haven't really been studies on pregnant women or breastfeeding women and intermittent fasting. Everything that is talked about is mostly speculative for the pregnancy and breastfeeding. But one thing that we do know is that intermittent fasting helps to suppress appetite, which is great, especially for most people, where we tend to never be satiated. We tend to never get that feeling of satisfaction from meals. And so it's easy to indulge in things like sugar as a result. But during pregnancy and during breastfeeding, when your nutrient needs are really a lot higher because you are growing a child, that's when, or fueling a child as well, that's when it is a time when either you don't want to be fasting at all, or you want a much larger, just like a 12-hour eating window. So we'll also be getting into that in a bit as well, but I just wanted to cover first in this beginning live stream these basic tenets to remember, because it's easy as you continue with intermittent fasting to think that, oh, I should fast for a really long time and I'll get even more results. That's not necessarily the case. So, just keep this in mind throughout your intermittent fasting journey. You don't necessarily need to be changing up your window unless you have one of these concerns that we went through. So that was like a little prelude to everything, but I want to say hi to some people. I saw a lot of people on here pop up. Good morning. I hope everyone has a great week. Keto coffee, cheers to that. Does matcha tea break a fast? Depends on what type of fast you're using. So if you are using more the gut healing type of aspect of a fast where you want to increase the migrating motor complex, that's when it will break a fast. But if you're looking for more of like the keeping insulin level lower, then it won't, just depending on what you're adding in. So I do have a keto matcha latte recipe on my channel as well. So if you just search like Autumn Bates matcha latte, it'll pop right up. Tanya, hello. Hi, Ellen. Greetings from Carolina and Germany. Okay, so I see some questions about IF, so intermittent fasting and IBS or constipation. I'm not sure what the question is, but I did have last week's live stream where I go into a lot of like the intermittent fasting side effects and what to look out for. So I'm not sure if you saw that one. I'm not sure what your question is, but I do go into like constipation, IBS a bit there. And remember, guys, if you have any questions, I will be going throughout like the whole live stream, answering some of them. So just make sure you put like the 3 or 4 question marks before your question, so I can just make sure I get to those and actually see them. Okay, Jessica's asking, for women, should you eat any different prior to your period or on your period? That is one of today's strategies that we're going to be going over. So stay tuned on that one. Good morning from the Philippines. Hi, Kyle. So Janine said, think this is over my head, want to start, but I have no clue how to start. And when you say break a fast, how do you people then eat normally okay, so basically you're asking how to start. I have a lot of YouTube videos on how you can get started. So if you I did a live stream a while back, I think it was like back in January for the New Year challenge on intermittent fasting schedules and how to actually plan your intermittent fasting window. Go to that live stream. Forget exactly what it's titled, but it was like back in January, like early January. So look for that one. If you are brand new to intermittent fasting, like if you just found my channel 2 days ago and you're just tuning in for this live stream, that's a great place to start. Which, for anyone who's just joined in on live stream, this is a live stream where we're going over how you can continue to see results with intermittent fasting and continue to make progress toward your goals while using intermittent fasting. And this is for the 3rd week of the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. So no, I saw a lot of people in the chat who are part of the challenge, but if you still want to join in, link in the description down below for the details. Okay, so I want to make sure I have a lot of information to go over. So I want to make sure we get through this, and I'll jump back and forth with some questions and answers here. So just make sure to put like 3 or 4 question marks before your question so that I can get to those like when I'm scrolling back. So now let's get into the actual details of like these strategies you can use to actually continue to see results with intermittent fasting. The first is how you address non-fasting days. So like, quote, non-fasting day rules, like what you should actually do if you're not going to fast on a day. Because you don't need to be using fasting every single day. You don't need to be doing like a 16-hour fast every day. It just doesn't always work out for schedules. Like that's the first thing to remember for sustainability, is that it has to work for your schedule long-term. And that's where being flexible with yourself is really important. So this gets into like window shifting and social rules. So we'll get into that as well. But it's just, remember, if you're using fasting, you don't need to be using it every single day to see results, especially when you're actually eating the right types of meals during your fasting or during your eating window. So that is another tip we'll get into later on. But if you aren't going to fast, you really need to make sure that you're still sticking with a meal structure. So rather than having, the 6 meals a day or the 6 snacks, I wouldn't really call like a 6 meal a day a meal structure. It's more like a snack structure. But if you aren't going to fast, it's really important that you actually stick to like 3 full meals. Reason why this is so important is because you're still going to be getting those gaps between meals. You're still going to be activating that migrating motor complex and getting that sense of a fast benefit from still having a meal structure. Granted, you won't have that fasting period or really as long of a fasting period everyone's going to fast when you're sleeping. You won't have as long of a fasting period for the insulin perks, but at the very least, you can still get the migrating motor complex stimulated, which is so important to be stimulating every day to actually clean out the GI tract. Somebody asked about IBS and constipation. That's such a huge problem. I know in the US, I'm sure in other countries as well, just GI issues is such a big problem overall and in general. And one of the main reasons, at least that I'm speculating, is that everyone is so used to eating so frequently throughout the day that you never get these gaps between meals to actually stimulate the gut cleaning process. I mean, it's a natural process that we should be having every day, where the migrating motor complex cleans out our GI tract. And if you're using like a 6-meal structure or snacking or grazing throughout the day, it's never getting activated. So it's no wonder that so many Americans are feeling constipated, experiencing gut inflammation, because we aren't ever activating the system that's meant to clean out our GI tract. So for those non-fasting days, at the very least, still making sure that you stick to that meal structure, which means that you really need to be making sure that you're eating the right types of foods to keep you satiated for that slightly longer amount of time that you'll have between meals. So that brings me into window shifting. You guys have probably heard me talk a lot about this because it is something really important to do, especially for the social aspect of using intermittent fasting. You should never feel that you're isolated from your family, your friends, that you can't go out to dinner with people because, oh, my eating window ends at 7, and so the dinner reservation's at 7:30. I can't do it. You should never feel that your intermittent fasting routine is impeding on your life as well. That's where, especially because a lot of these situations are going to happen on the weekend anyway, a good strategy is just to shift that window a bit on that day. So usually, most people, I'm saying it as if I even do this. That's not true. For having reservations for restaurants. So a lot of people are very organized in that. I'm not. We never get reservations. We're always those people who have to wait in line forever. But if you actually know, like, you have dinner reservations at like 8 o'clock, and you know that the dinner will probably go for about an hour and a half, but your normal eating window ends at 7, that's when you can just adjust your eating window for that day. Start eating about an hour and a half later if you want to keep that same eating window time. And that way you're still getting the fasting benefits. You're still getting that smaller amount of time that you're eating on that day. It's just slightly shifted for that day. And then the next day, go immediately back. So you will still have a slightly smaller fasting period in between that dinner that you had, with friends that ended at 9:30 and maybe your normal start time for your eating window the next day. But it's good to go straight back to your normal routine so that you can get back into your routine. A lot of what will come down to, when it comes to sustainability and making this work for you as well, is not only being flexible with yourself, but also trying to form habits. And having habits that during the week or during your usual time that you could have, the normal eating schedule that maybe isn't affected by your social life, having it be as consistent as possible so that you can get used to having that schedule. And it's not something you have to stress out about and look at, oh, is it 6:51? I can't eat now because it's 3 minutes past my eating window when it ends. Okay, so lots of questions on here. Lots of people talking about MMC and how that's helped them. The MMC is something that for a long time, people didn't even know about it. Like it wasn't something that was even discovered until fairly recently, but it just goes to show how important it is, because once you actually stimulate it, the GI tract will do a lot of the cleaning itself. Like, we think that we have to put stuff in our body to get our body to heal itself. But if we just give our body the tools and time, it will also just do its job and clean itself out. So definitely MMC is one of those situations where it's really great for actually addressing gut health. Okay, I'm going to answer some questions before I get to the next one. Okay, I see some people saying, so us in the Facebook group have experienced a gain in sizes and weight after detox in one round of the 21-day program. Could you give us some advice about this? Are you asking after doing the detox? So I've seen a couple people say that they've experienced weight loss during the detox, and then they experience some weight gain when they start with the intermittent fasting portion. There's a few reasons why this could be. First of all, I would recommend checking out the type of scale you're using, because with intermittent fasting, it does increase growth hormone production. So there's a likelihood that it could also be from just increased muscle gain as well. One thing that the detox does do is that it really focuses on decreasing the sugar content, really focuses on actually eliminating the added sugars completely. So there is going to be some amount of water loss as well. So keep that in mind. So when you do start to reincorporate maybe some starches, then that could cause a little bit of water to be held back on. If you are experiencing weight gain, you could also be very carbohydrate sensitive. So that's where looking at the Level Up Guide, the advanced weight loss strategies, where it really addresses that component. Really important. Which actually, this is something I wanted to talk about as well, is that with intermittent fasting or just with wellness goals in general, all of our bodies are going to respond differently. So everyone, the main tenet of like, let's just give weight loss as an example for a goal. If weight loss is your goal, the overall goal is to make sure that we can keep insulin low. Insulin is going to cause the body to be in storage mode. It's going to cause the body to shut off the fat burning process called lipolysis. But how each person gets there could be different. That's where some people, like I mentioned, if you're very insulin resistant, might need a longer fast because of that to help bring insulin lower. Or if you're very carbohydrate sensitive, the amount and types of carbohydrates that need to be had or can be had during that eating window can also greatly vary. Some people will have a really big insulin response to certain carbohydrates that others won't. So that's where the advanced weight loss strategies really addresses that. If you have found that you're having difficulties losing weight. So it is in the Level Up Guide, which is in the complete intermittent fasting bundle, also linked down description below, but definitely check that out because it might just be that you need to address your own physiology and make sure that you're working with the types of foods that will work best with your body. So, intermittent fasting, great tool, amazing tool, but it's not the tool. It's not the only tool that you need to be using. And that is literally why I created the complete intermittent fasting bundle back in, 2018? Because I saw so many people using intermittent fasting, but not addressing their meals or not addressing the types of meals that are going to work for them and their body and their goals. And especially for women where we are so sensitive to the hunger hormone ghrelin, it can really mess with hormones as a result if you aren't addressing the types of foods you're eating during the eating window, the amount of protein, which we've talked so much about lately on my channel. I have another quick video coming out this week on how you can recalculate your protein needs. But really just with that, it's important to know each person's response is going to be different. And so we need to adjust where your body's at. You adjust the meals to where your body's at rather. So if you've experienced weight gain, like I mentioned, might be more carbohydrate sensitive, definitely check out the advanced weight loss strategies. That's what it was designed for, so that you can help further hone in on your own body's response. Okay. So that goes into treat day rules. So actually, first a sip of coffee real quick. Okay. That was a little bit of a tangent for one question, but it's an important one. It's important to remember each of us have different responses. Each of us need to be able to provide our body the type of fuel that it needs, and we need to know that there's not always going to be the same response for each person, and that's okay. We just need to work with where our body's at. Okay, so treat day rules. I'm saying that word rules just tentatively, but really just guidelines for what you can do to make sure that you're going to feel your best after incorporating a treat. If you guys have been following me for a while and you've seen I think it was back in like 2019, maybe, when I created a video on using treat days to actually be sustainable with long-term goals. There's actually a study that I talk about in that video where they had some people who had one scheduled treat day per week, others who didn't, and others where they just stuck to like the same type of protocol. In this case, it was a calorie restrictive type of protocol, short term, and the other had the same type of protocol but incorporated a treat day per week. The one who incorporated a treat day per week actually saw the same results, if not better. That's because it is really great to actually have built-in sustainability so that you don't feel that if you do have some type of treat that everything is ruined and now it's going to lead to 5 days of having Oreo cookies every day because you just felt like everything was ruined, might as well. So when you actually schedule in some type of treat and you allow for that, it really provides your emotional space as well for that mental flexibility to incorporate foods that maybe aren't in line with your wellness goals, but have that more emotional satisfaction, which is something that we all need to. But what you can actually do to make sure that you are getting the best results possible and feeling the best after a treat. So this is something, if you've seen the Facebook group, people will talk about where they had maybe something that was in line with their goals the night before and they just feel destroyed the next day. And we want to avoid that as much as possible, where you aren't going to feel destroyed from your treat. So the first things first, aim for the treat to be at the end of the day. Reason why this is so important is because if you have that treat, which usually is going to be something extremely starchy, refined, or high in sugar, which will really affect the blood glucose levels. If you're going to be having a treat early in the day, that's just going to cause your blood glucose levels to be on spike and fall, spike and fall, spike and fall the rest of the day. And that will make your cravings go up throughout the day. And you're more likely to then have, follow up those pancakes at your local pancake house from the morning with having, macaroni and cheese at lunch and then finishing up with a pizza because you are riding that blood glucose high and low, and the cravings are spiked throughout the day. So if you are going to be having some type of treat, definitely keeping it toward the end of the day is the first strategy to make this sustainable. The second is to always, always, always make sure that you do pair whatever treat you're having with at least one serving of protein. So let's just give the idea of pizza, for example, where if you are going to be going out and having pizza and you're at like an Italian restaurant, getting instead of just the pizza on its own, having the starter as like the meatball servings that you can have before you have the pizza itself, or adding chicken on top of your pizza. This is so important because it helps to actually bring in satiety into the equation. So if you, let's give popcorn as an example. If you are having a ton of popcorn, which has essentially zero protein, zero fat, nothing that will keep you satiated. If you're planning on having a lot of popcorn as a treat and you're not pairing any proteins with it, that's just going to make you be able to keep eating more and more of it, because insulin really is just going to cause you to crave more and more of it. That's why, if you're at the movies or at your house having a movie night and you make a big bowl of popcorn, it's so easy to eat like 12, 15 cups of popcorn because there's no satiety factor. So to help make sure that you're not having such high amounts of these foods that's going to make you not feel great the next day, pairing it with a serving of protein helps to then add that satiety factor in so that you can then not feel that you have to have like the entire pizza, but feel satisfied with one or two slices. And that leads me to the thing that I kind of alluded to earlier. Don't fast longer the next day. So this is something that I've seen other people within my field as well who do recommend fasting. They've recommended the opposite of this. And I've just seen from working with clients one-on-one that when people do fast longer the next day, it just makes those cravings intensify. And so that you are just going to end up feeling like you need to be having those pancakes again, or you can't stop thinking about having a big bowl of rice or whatever it is the next day after having a treat. In fact, I've actually found it's more beneficial to just break your fast right when you're hungry, which is likely going to be earlier the next day when you are incorporating some type of treat because of those more unstable blood glucose levels and because cravings are going to be higher. Starting off right when you're hungry with a really protein, fat, and fiber rich meal. So like with the chia brakki bowls, with the Greek yogurt bowls. If you guys have followed me on Instagram, like my cottage cheese bowls, which I know is such a hit or miss item with people, I'm obsessed with them. I know it's like very, very love-hate relationship for a lot of people. But I lost my track there thinking about cottage cheese and how I'm going to break my fast with this after. Right, going back. So breaking your fast with something that is really rich in protein, fat, and fiber right away when you actually are feeling hungry. That means you're probably going to have a larger eating window that day, and that's totally fine because it's going to stop those further cravings in its tracks. So that's where I found, especially with working with clients one-on-one, to be the best strategy to actually still have some type of treat, but make sure that doesn't trickle into the next day and have cravings continue. Because most people who have had some type of treat after using intermittent fasting and using a lot of the meal timing structures that we talked about in the complete intermittent fasting bundle, notice the level of hunger and cravings go way up the next day. And that's just inevitable when you do incorporate a treat that is really rich in those starches and sugars. So really making sure that you are breaking your fast when you're actually hungry and with something that's going to really boost satiety to help prevent further cravings is key. So obviously I have a lot of different recipes on my channel. I also, obviously, anything in the complete intermittent fasting bundle is fantastic. So just make sure that you're actually preparing yourself with something that is going to stop those further cravings in its tracks. Cindy is asking, would you mind speaking a little slower? I honestly try. That's me. This is me trying to speak slower, but this is just my nature. You can play me at 0.75, I hear. That helps. Okay, I want to try and answer one more question between, because I have a couple more areas to get into, but before we get into those. Okay, so Colin is asking about longer fasts, and you mentioned that you're prescribed an ACE inhibitor. That's where I mentioned really make sure that you check in with your doctor. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you how to address your medications while fasting. So it's not that you can't use fasting. Actually, maybe with some type of medications, but really make sure that you are checking with your doctor, because there's a lot of metabolic changes going on, and that might affect the actual medication you're taking. Oh, hi, Alexandra. Hi from France. Good afternoon there. Maybe good evening. Okay, I want to try and answer one question on here. Skills many. My biggest fear is going back to a movie theater and diving into a bucket of popcorn. Yeah, I know. It's been quite a while since we've gone to the movie theaters, and that's Trevor's biggest vice. So we'll see how that goes once we can go back in. Okay. So Lorraine, how would I determine if I was carbohydrate sensitive via insulin resistant? With insulin resistance, you can get a fasting insulin test done. It's not something that will be often done with a lot of doctors. You usually have to specifically ask for it. So it is a really good idea just to get that baseline done so you can see where you're at. I forget the exact stat, but a surprising number of Americans are some degree insulin resistant and don't even know it. I mean, it's a really great example, even with pregnancy. Insulin resistance goes way up, which is why gestational diabetes is so common with pregnancy. But also just as we age, insulin resistance goes up. So I definitely, if you want a baseline just to see where you're at, you could have your doctor run that test for you. There's some debate on the actual number where it'll be determined on insulin resistance, where some people will say it's a little bit higher than really should be allowed. This is a big debate going on in the nutrition community right now with a lot of the researchers who are very researched on insulin. Are suggesting a lower fasting insulin than is usually suggested, but you can always just go to your doctor, ask for the insulin test, so you can see where you're at and determine if you are insulin resistant. Okay. Now, going into the fourth strategy here, which is crazy to think we're only at 4. So other really important thing with intermittent fasting for longevity, which if you are just tuning in, I've seen a lot of people come in just now. If you are just tuning in, we are talking about intermittent fasting and how to actually use it sustainably and still be able to see results for a long time. The other biggest factor is making sure that you're actually eating the types of meals that support intermittent fasting. So if you're eating the types of meals that just make you hungry often, so really raise insulin levels or work against the benefits of intermittent fasting by raising insulin levels, that's not going to be sustainable, because you're going to be very hungry during your fasting period every day. Or you might even experience muscle loss, or there's a lot of issues that can go into play when you're not eating the right types of meals during your eating window to then counter or build upon the benefits that you're having with intermittent fasting itself. So if you guys are unfamiliar with the actual reasons why intermittent fasting works, which I did just do a more detailed video on that, I think last week, but intermittent fasting works so well because it helps to keep insulin levels low. And that's what makes the body actually turn on the fat burning process called lipolysis. It actually frees up fat cells to then release those fats from the fat cells itself and use that as an energy source. So with the eating window, you want to make sure that as much as possible, you are helping to build upon those benefits. So making sure you're focused. You guys have heard me say this 1,000 times, and it's because it matters that much. And it's because I see so many people not doing it, even though I say it so often, focusing on protein, fat, and fiber. Protein, really big important one, because that is the most important for maintaining muscle mass, actually making sure that you're achieving the body recomposition goals. So meaning that you aren't tapping into muscle mass while burning fat as a fuel source. I do have multiple videos on how to calculate your protein needs, but I do have another one coming out this week. So if you aren't subscribed, make sure you are, so you see that video coming out. It's a nice little 3-minute video that actually takes you step by step through how to calculate your needs. But making sure that you actually focus on the types of foods that don't greatly stimulate insulin. And that is going to be protein, fat, and fiber-rich foods. Now, this is where we get into then the specifics for each person. So I had talked about this earlier. Again, if you're just tuning in, you can always rewind later and check out some of the earlier answers. But you also have to address your carbohydrate sensitivity. So each person is going to be more responsive or less responsive to carbohydrates, which means that some people can have more starches in their diet than others while still being able to maintain their wellness goals. It's not fair. It's something that's not fair for each person, but it is something that we have to know, understand, and work with. So with that, this is exactly why advanced weight loss strategies within the complete intermittent fasting bundle. I did see some questions about weight gain. This is where you probably might be a little bit more carbohydrate sensitive. Definitely dive into that section of the program, because that is what it was designed for. Whereas someone else who maybe is an athlete and is more insulin sensitive as a result can have a little bit more of the starches and use that to help recover from workouts. So always focusing first on protein, fat, and fiber, and then use that carbohydrate sensitivity and knowing where your carbohydrate sensitivity is to then make sure it's tailored to you and your goals. So as I mentioned, that's where the level up guide is especially important for actually using the types of strategies that are going to fit your goals best. So just recapping that one, making sure that when you're using intermittent fasting, you're not just fasting. You're actually looking at the meals as well. You're focusing on the types of foods that aren't going to greatly stimulate insulin, and making sure that it's going to keep you satiated in the process. So a ton of resources on that, a ton of information, a ton of recipes, especially in the bundle, and a few free ones on my YouTube channel as well. But that really can't be stressed enough on how important it is to make sure you're eating the right types of foods during your eating window. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of intermittent fasting experts talk about how you really don't need to be focused on your meals. And I time and time again see people come to me after talking to those people because they experienced either weight gain, crazy hormone imbalances, crazy issues with hunger. And it's because that just doesn't work long term. And we're about sustainability and seeing results for the long term and fueling the body for the long term. And I have a great video coming out with Katie coming up soon, but it's something that can be hard to wrap our head around, that actually fueling our body with more food of the right types of foods can help with those long-term goals and make it so that this is sustainable. But really making sure that you are addressing the food, that you are getting enough of your needs, that you are focusing on the carbohydrate sensitivity and how much is going to work for your body, but always building your meals around the protein, fat, and fiber. If you can't follow my fast talking, definitely replay that at 0.75 speed. Okay, I want to answer, we have 2 more sections to go over, but I want to make sure I get to some questions because this is a big topic, because sustainability it can be so hard for a lot of people, and it's because you need to actually make this work for you and your goals. That's the number one reason why sustainability doesn't happen for people, because they're trying to make something, a square peg fit in a round hole. It just doesn't work. So even though the overall goals for everyone is going to be making sure you're not greatly spiking insulin, that's going to change depending on each person, how long your fasting window should be, how short it should be, what types of foods you're having, to what degree you can have starches or not. So, it's really important that we address that underlying cause, but making sure that we understand that how it's going to look for each person, how we get to that endpoint is going to be different. And again, that's exactly why the Level Up Guide has those different protocols with the Hormone Balancing Pro, the Gut Healing Guru, advanced weight loss strategies for that reason. I promised I was going to answer a question. Okay, let me get back to that. I'm going to sip on a keto coffee. Cheers, guys. Sip on this real quick while I look for a question. Okay, great question. So Donna says, do you have any recommendations for stopping emotional eating? Intermittent fasting apps do not help. Yeah, I agree. I've had a couple apps reach out to me to try it and get them to be sponsored on the channel. The reason why I never have them on the channel is because I've actually found that maybe for some people can help build that habit, but I found it is just another means of tracking, just like calorie counting. So I found that they don't always work long term, which is the big thing I'm about, is making sure that it's sustainable. But going back to Donna's question, do you guys see how I can so easily go on rants? So do you have any recommendations for stopping emotional eating? Yeah. So first of all, making sure that your physiology is in the right place first. So if you are stress is always going to increase the sugar cravings. Inevitable with every person, and maybe not sugar, but starch or salt. Those common types of cravings, because we're looking for something comforting when we're feeling stressed. But if you already are in a state where your physiology hasn't addressed satiety, haven't addressed the physiological state of satiety earlier in the day, we're already, even if you weren't stressed and you were going to, you as a result going to have those increased cravings because you didn't address satiety, that's going to build so strongly on top of the emotional aspect of cravings. And there are those two different aspects. There's the physiological and there's the emotional. If we don't first address the physiological, it's setting us up for failure if we experience any stress, where our cravings are going to be through the roof. So this is easier said than done, because usually when we're stressed, we also either don't feel like eating. I know some people do feel like eating during that time. Really depends on the person. But when you're stressed, usually you don't even have time to eat the right types of foods, or you're not craving the right types of foods. This is where it's so important to make sure that you go back to the types of meals that you know are more supportive of your satiety. So having that baseline, starting off, even if you are feeling stressed, making sure you make the time to eat that Greek yogurt bowl, or making sure that maybe if you don't have time to make dinner, that you go and grab something pre-made, get a rotisserie chicken from your local health food store that is pre-cooked, so you don't have to worry about adding that additional stressor in. But making sure that you're actually building your meals around stopping the physiological side of cravings, so it makes it easier to help address the emotional. Once you've addressed that, so that obviously goes into a lot of the AN nutrient timing strategies we talk about in the complete intermittent fasting bundle, which is linked in the description below. If you guys don't know what that is, it's my intermittent fasting programs to help actually make this a sustainable lifestyle. But once you've actually addressed that, and let's say you do still have cravings, a lot of ways to go about this. Sometimes we just need to have it. Sometimes it's just important to know that it's been a very long day and you need to have something that's just going to have that more emotional satisfaction. But let's say if it's happening every once in a while, if this is happening every single night, we obviously need to make sure that we're having habits and strategies around addressing that too. So there's two different ways that you can really go about this. One is to have the better form of a treat. So my personal favorite is, and I have a video on how to make this. It's amazing. I've been having it probably a little too often lately. But having like berries and cream, like I make my own homemade berries and cream where it's extremely low in sugar, but it still feels like a treat. And it is actually pretty satiating because the cream is going to be so rich in fats that it does help to add to that satiety. Worst thing you can do in that state of emotional eating is to eat the foods that do not trigger satiety. So having something that's a little sweet, but still triggers satiety. So rather than reaching for a Reese's peanut butter cup, making a chocolate bomb bite from the programs instead. So you're still getting some fat to keep you satiated, but you do get a little bit of that sweetness to make sure that you also get that more emotional satisfaction as well. Another tool, if weather permitting, we are getting into spring, and I know here in Southern California, it's like beautiful out lately. So this is really easy, but I know other places it's snowing. So maybe it's not as easy. But another factor to do as well is to help just naturally bring down those cortisol levels, because usually emotional eating is tied to stress. So getting outside and going for a walk. We've talked about this so many times on how getting outside and going for a walk has actually been shown clinically to bring down cortisol levels. And then that in itself could just stop any of those cravings you had anyway. So aiming for about 10 to 15 minute walk outside, preferably. I mean, maybe walking inside could, if you have like a treadmill and if it is snowing, could help at least to get you moving and get some like just of that physical, emotional energy out. But if you can get outside, you also get that negative ion exposure and help to get those serum cortisol levels down and help address emotional eating that way. So a lot of different strategies I just talked about there. But using that in a stepwise approach, addressing your physiology, having the better treats on hand, and then making sure that if this is something that happens frequently, addressing the stress and trying to get outside and go for a walk to bring that stress level down. My dad's in the chat. Hey, Autumn Bates. Hi, Dad. Martin, love your videos. Always nice to watch and learn from you. Thank you. Andrea is saying, why would water first thing in the morning make me feel sick? There might be some amount of hypoglycemia going on there. It's probably just low blood sugar in general. But you could always have your doctor check that, because you might just want to see if you do have hypoglycemia. Feeling nauseous from not eating anything is usually a sign of low blood sugar. But definitely check in with your doctor, because you might need to address that. Okay, so Colin is saying, I've tried and just can't do ACV, apple cider vinegar. Yes, I am diluting. Recommendations for making it more palatable. Can I add anything else to defeat the vinegar taste? I've done a video on this, on different ways to use apple cider vinegar to make it more palatable. So I'm not sure if you've tried it with using like sparkling water, for example. Some of the AM peeps have said that it tastes almost like a kombucha that way. It just helps to make it feel like not just drinking diluted apple cider vinegar. Another is to add just a small squeeze of lemon. So you can use a small squeeze of lemon, about, a small slice isn't going to break your fast anyway. So it just could help cover up the flavor a bit. Or putting it in warm lemon water is also another good option. But I do have a video on this. If you just type like Autumn Bates apple cider vinegar, pops up, and I go into some of those strategies there. Okay, so someone is asking thoughts on Metamucil and intermittent fasting. I just wrote a blog post on this, literally on Friday. It's not coming out for another week, I think. But I do, if you guys are ever wondering, like, does this break a fast? Like, does gum break a fast, or does cinnamon break a fast? I have a plethora of articles that goes into each of these specific ingredients, and if it breaks a fast, why it does or doesn't, the amounts to look out for, so that you just continue building upon this information. So if you just go to my website, autumnlnutrition.com, go to the blog, and then there's a whole category on does it break a fast. Great section to reference, especially if you're new to intermittent fasting and unsure of the details. So Darla, I'm a sugar person, but this live stream is so informative. Thank you so much. Good. I'm happy this is helpful. Cinnamon is the bomb. Agreed. Oh, hi, Dad. Okay. Now let's get into intermittent fasting and sustainability with exercise, because this is another thing that will really change throughout your intermittent fasting journey. If you're part of the spring intermittent fasting challenge that's going on right now, which if you still want to join in, you can check out the details in the description below, where AM peeps literally around the world, so awesome, are doing the intermittent fasting challenge together. So if you do want to join in, check that out, description down below. But if you are brand new to intermittent fasting, you know that a lot of the details suggest to you, and it's really important that when you are new, you ease into exercise. So even if you are someone who does a lot of exercise, you are like strength training every day, maybe you're doing like high intensity interval training. When you start using intermittent fasting, very important that you really scale back on the intensity, because the body is getting used to using fat as fuel, as a main fuel source to easily tap into. If you were previously eating a very high carb diet or eating multiple times per day, like 6, 7, 8 times a day, it might take a little bit more time for you to adjust to using fat as fuel. It could be anywhere between a day to 3 weeks. It just depends on the person and how metabolically flexible, which means how able you are to go back and forth from using fat to carbohydrates as a fuel source. Might take a little bit longer or shorter, just depends. So that's why it's important to ease into exercise, because exercise does have a higher energy demand. And if you aren't, if you're exercising at too high of intensity in the beginning of intermittent fasting stages, then that will really ramp up hunger, really ramp up sugar cravings, and really work against actually being able to transition to using fat as fuel as a consistent source. Because especially with higher intensity training, the body shifts over to using carbohydrates. That's just inevitable physiology. Like if you've taken a basic exercise science class, it's one of the first things that you learn is that as the heart rate goes up, the body shifts over to using more carbohydrates as a fuel source. because less oxygen is available. So when oxygen is less available, it's harder to use fat. So your body switches over to using a fast source of fuel, which is really just those simple sugars, where fat can't be used during that time. So it's where easing into it in the beginning, super important. But after that initial 3 days, 3 weeks, rebuilding is also important. Getting back to a state where you are incorporating the exercise that fits your goals is also very important. Because, with longevity, with, let's say it's weight loss as your goal, or maintaining muscle mass, building muscle mass, you can still do that with intermittent fasting. In fact, intermittent fasting does help to naturally increase growth hormones. You do get those benefits with muscle production during your fasted state, but also with muscle building with intermittent fasting. You still need to get that stimulus from exercise. And in fact, it's really important for everyone to have some amount of exercise, minimum base, the walking. That's absolute minimum what everyone should be doing. And depending on where you're at, that's great. You can just stick to that. But if you have the ability to, adding in some type of strength training, resistance training, any type of weight-bearing exercise is also incredibly important for maintaining insulin sensitivity, actually keeping the cells more responsive to insulin, which is what we want, so we don't have to overproduce insulin. And for long-term health and wellness goals, more insulin resistance, which is the opposite of insulin sensitivity, is related to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, a lot of things we don't want in the future. So having some type of strength training helps to keep the body more insulin sensitive, which is great. But you need to build upon that and ease into it. And rather than going from 0 to 100, starting off as if you're a beginner to exercise, even if you aren't. So starting off with the walking, then the next week adding in, one strength training day or two strength training days, but a lot lower weight or intensity than you're used to. So this is also something, the athlete protocol, you guys have probably seen this also in the Level Up Guide, just like the Gut Healing Guru, just like the Advanced Weight Loss Strategies, addresses more of that aspect of being able to use intermittent fasting while also having some type of athletic goal in mind. Even if you aren't a quote athlete, but maybe you're a casual athlete, looking for having some type of strength training goals or competing in something. A lot of you guys know I used to compete in triathlons, and I did a marathon once, and it was awful because I did it the old fashioned way of high carb. Very, very, very bad. Absolutely crashed. That's a story for another day. But having the being able to still train while you're using intermittent fasting is important, because then you have that sense of longevity and that sense of still having the long-term wellness goals too. So making sure that you're easing into it, starting from 0, really walking, base minimum, what you should be getting in, and then slowly ramping it up. And if you can, incorporating exercise during that fasted state, most of the time actually really helps to keep your muscles protected with the growth hormone. So it's a really good time to be just helping improve insulin resistance, helping to make sure that your body has that protection from growth hormone. If you can't work out during your fasted state, perfectly fine. Like, again, this is about sustainability, making sure it fits you and your goals long term, but still making sure that you are incorporating some amount of strength training or some amount of weight training. In the 21-day intermittent fasting program, I have the weight training programs that you can use within that as well to start slowly increasing too. But with intermittent fasting, with sustainability, with long-term wellness goals, with long-term weight loss goals, and making sure you can actually maintain them, incorporating some amount of exercise is key. Helps keep you insulin sensitive, helps to make sure that your bones are protected, helps to build bone density. There's so many aspects of this. And it's something that we don't talk as much about, but this is something I want to talk more about in the future. So making sure you do start to incorporate exercise, but doing it at the pace to slowly build. Okay, so I see some more questions on here. Yeah, Steven says, great point on exercise, Autumn. Lower intensity lets you exercise every day, recover better. Think of exercise while fasting as a marathon, not a sprint. Very true. And you still, if you do want to, if you love high intensity interval training and you want to still incorporate that 1 or 2 times per week to get that heart rate variability in, which there's a lot of great benefits to that as well when done the right way. If you want to do it during your fasted state, try and make sure it's as close as possible when you go to break your fast, because your cravings are going to be way up after that. And it's because the body shifts into using carbohydrates as a fuel source, really drains a lot of the glycogen, which is the carbohydrate stores within your muscles, and really increases the cravings as a result. So making sure that you get it as close as possible. If it is a higher intensity interval training where your heart rate's getting way up and it's way up throughout it, that you are breaking your fast fairly soon, or you're having it during your eating window so you can get ahead of those cravings. Okay, let me get a sip. As you can hear, lots of talking just gets my voice hoarse. Okay, the last major area I want to talk about, I started to drool again just even thinking about my next sip of keto coffee. If you guys watch my videos where I'm actually making food, I'm always halfway drooling while making the food itself because I'm just getting so excited. So then the last area to consider, especially for women, is if you are on your period or that 7 to 10 days before your period. One thing to keep in mind is that there's not a lot of research around this, weirdly enough, but energy needs are speculated to really go up that 7 to 10 days before a period starts. So that's why a lot of women experience, or likely the main reason why a lot of women experience a lot of those cravings, because we probably aren't adjusting our nutrient needs during that time to actually provide enough for our body's needs. So sugar cravings go up. Because remember, when we don't provide enough for our body's needs, sugar cravings are going to go way up because it's looking for a fast source of energy to get what it needs. And sugar and carbohydrates are the fastest breakdown of energy. So that's where those cravings really can come into play. Especially I've just from talking with a lot of women, from being a woman myself, I've seen that a lot of those cravings tend to happen around the afternoon time to the evening. It's not usually first thing in the morning, which is even more evidence of the fact that it comes down to making sure that you're actually getting enough nutrients for your needs during that eating window, that 7 to 10 days before your period, so that you don't get those cravings later on. So if you are in your period with, or about to have your period with intermittent fasting, you might need to break your fast a little bit earlier so that you can get ahead of those cravings. And that's fine. Remember, we talked about how you don't need to be using fasting every single day to see results. You can still see results as long as you're addressing the types of meals that you're having and having a true meal structure, which if it sounds unfamiliar to you, this is the first thing I covered in this live stream. You can go back to the beginning and check that out. But your energy needs are higher, so we need to make sure that we're compensating for that. And so that means likely increasing the fat content on those days. So let's say, for example, you're used to making one of my smoothies and you have that 3 to 4 servings of fat in there. On those days, you might need to increase that by another 1 to 2 servings of fat. So adding in another tablespoon of peanut butter and adding on coconut flakes toppings as well to get that fat content up to help provide the satiety to meet those energy needs during that 7 to 10 days before you start your period. That way, we're preventing a lot of those cravings that can happen. And so you're not going to have at the end of the day, a bunch of I don't know why animal cookies were the first thing that came to my mind. Animal cookies at the end of the day. Or those Girl Scout cookies that are in the freezer that you forgot about until it's that 6 o'clock at night, the few days before your period starts. So you can help prevent a lot of those cravings by just making sure that you're actually addressing the likely increased energy needs during that 7 to 10 days before your period by increasing the fat content specifically. As long as you're still getting enough of the protein, you calculate your protein needs, you know roughly what that looks like for each of your meals to get to that point. As long as you're getting enough protein, really here the sliding or the moving component is going to be the fat. So making sure that you get in enough fat for your satiety needs. So you remember, fat doesn't cause an insulin response. So I know that can freak a lot of people out, especially us as women. It can really freak a lot of people out on adding in more fat and it causing us to gain weight. It doesn't cause a spike in insulin. So it's much better to increase the fat content that you're going to be having at that meal rather than depriving yourself of those energy needs earlier on and then having the frozen half stale cookies that are in your freezer. It's really important to make sure that you're addressing that. And one thing that is often, I have as a note here to make sure I bring up, one thing that's often brought up about women and fasting is the idea that it's going to completely mess with hormones. This is only true if you're using intermittent fasting as a form of calorie restriction. So if you're using it as a way to cut out the nutrients, which what we've talked about, overriding theme throughout this whole live stream is getting enough nutrients for your body's needs on every single day. And so if you're using intermittent fasting to simply cut out a full meal, yeah, that's not going to work long term, especially for women, because we're so sensitive to the hunger hormone ghrelin. It can really cause a lot of just issues with our own female hormones. So really making sure that you're always addressing your nutrient needs during your eating window, so that's not a problem. Because a lot of those studies that have been done where it's trying to point out that intermittent fasting might not be good for women, either it's rat studies, which is unreliable, or it's using alternate day fasting, which if you guys don't know what that is, it's where you're fasting mostly every other day. So either you're having a 500 calorie limit on those fasting days, or you're completely fasting every day, which means inherently you're not getting enough nutrient needs every other day for the body. So absolutely, I agree with those studies that women shouldn't be using alternate day fasting. I have a whole video on this, which I know that some people have used it successfully. Goes back to bio-individuality. But for women especially, I found very important to be making sure you're actually getting enough nutrients for your needs on each day so that you don't have any issues when it comes to calorie restriction. Calorie restriction for women, awful, like so bad for us to actually be addressing our female hormones. Like that is something that really needs to be addressed, and having enough nutrient needs for us. Using calorie restriction, especially long-term, can really cause a lot of damage. So it's important to be getting enough of the right types of foods during your eating window. I do have a whole, of course, and this goes back to, which I did talk about, like women using intermittent fasting during pregnancy or breastfeeding. The main reason why that's probably not a good idea is because intermittent fasting does cause a lot of the appetite suppressing, or it can act as appetite suppressant because your insulin levels are lower and the fat burning is turned on. So you're fueling your own body. And so it's easy to not feel hungry. But during those times, we do need to be eating more. So that's when it would probably not work out to be using a fasting protocol. But unless you're directed from your doctor, there are circumstances where perhaps you wouldn't want to use fasting. Like if you have a history of an eating disorder, or you're still recovering from an eating disorder, or if you're taking certain medications that wouldn't allow for it. Just making sure that if you don't have those issues that your doctor says is actually perfectly fine for you to use fasting, making sure that you then are eating enough for your nutrient needs. And remember, especially 7 to 10 days before the period, or when the period usually starts, that's when energy needs are speculated to really go up. So making sure that you're addressing your meals, getting in enough fats to actually provide the energy for your body so that you don't have those sugar cravings, which ultimately would be way more detrimental to your goals. On that, I need to take a sip of coffee. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go and answer some questions here. Yeah. So Colin says, always looking for more literature on fasting, practice, and theory. Unfortunately, lots of stuff push things like 5-2 fasting, which is the alternate day fasting, or some form of alternate day fasting, which I personally don't agree with. Just finished obesity code, other recommendations. Shameless plug, but complete intermittent fasting bundle. It's literally the whole, precipice of what this has been built into. All of the literature that I found for myself, there's a lot of resources in there that you can actually go back and review the studies themselves that are linked out directly within each thing. Linked in the description down below. But in terms of other, at least fasting options that I've seen that are great, not necessarily fasting, but remember, there is the literature also on the types of foods to eat. And I am a big believer on making sure that you continue to learn and educate yourself on what is going to be best for your body to thrive. If you guys have ever read any Gary Taubes books or information, that's a really great place to start, so you can start to understand the science and the history of the science behind how we got to the idea that calorie restriction was the end all for weight loss, and why that's actually not the case. So he has a couple great books on that. So that'd be a good one for you to start off with outside of the realm of fasting, to just help build upon your nutrition information too. Okay. I want to answer some other questions, but try and get some variety in here. Do you have tips for when you go out to eat? That is actually something I meant to add onto my plethora of information I went through today. Yes. So I do have also in the complete intermittent fasting bundle restaurant guidelines that if you have that, great tool and resource, and it goes through the different types of restaurants that and examples of what you can do. But remember, always first look for where your protein source is coming from. That's the number one tool I would recommend, because that's going to be the key factor of making sure that you're actually reaching satiety and that you're not going to be hungry after the meal. So what I like to do first is always just think like, what type of protein do I feel like that day? And seeing, I'm not sure if you guys heard the car back there. Sorry about that. And seeing which type of protein fits what I'm feeling that day. So like, let's say if we're at a burger place, obviously that's what I'm going to be having, like is going to be a burger. But one thing that you can always do if you are treating this as something that's going to be more in line with your goals is swap out those starches and incorporate, or at least the low quality starches, because there's a time and a place for starches. Swap out the low quality starches like a bun, even if it's quote whole wheat, still will have a crazy response on insulin, and incorporate high quality fats. Because one thing that tends to be lacking in a lot of these restaurant meals is going to be the fat. So it's easy to skimp on the fat and replace it with cheap starches. So using bread, for example, or piling on a lot of fries on the side, swapping out like the low quality starch, like the bun, and asking for, a fried egg on top, or guacamole, or if you aren't lactose sensitive, cheese, something that's going to help bring up the fat content to help further contribute to satiety. Which obviously at a burger place, it's pretty easy to do. Some of the more tricky places tends to be like Italian restaurants, but even then you can usually have some type of protein as the base. So like I mentioned earlier with Italian meatballs, there's like chicken piccata, chicken parmesan. There's a lot of options you can do there. Even Indian restaurants tends to be a little tricky too, but looking for the actual protein source first and then building your meal around that. So if like you're vegetarian and you're at an Indian restaurant, paneer is a great option. I know paneer is usually always available at an Indian restaurant. It's a great source of a vegetarian source of protein. And just making sure you first address the protein, and then build your meal around that as much as possible, trying to swap the low quality starches for a high quality source of fat so you get satiety and you're actually able to have that work toward your goals. This is assuming that this is meant to be more of a in line with your goals meal. But if it's a treat meal, obviously go back to what I had mentioned earlier. I go more into this. Sophie always needs to make an appearance. Go back to, I think it was like 30 minutes ago that I talked about the treat meal. So you can look into that and make sure that you are addressing the treat meal as the best way possible. So you also just need to check, like, what is my goal with this going out to eat meal? Is it to have it as a treat, or is it because I just really don't feel like cooking, but I still want it to be in line with my goals? If so, if it is something that still needs to be really in line with your goals, trying to remove those low quality starches for high quality fats, and always building your meal around that protein source. And if not, if it's a treat, go back and check out what I have to say about treats. Oh. Okay, so Lisa is saying, what about menopause? Are there foods and IF rules that will help? So one thing to keep in mind that happens for 99% of people is that as we age, insulin resistance goes up. So this is where even throughout life, what we are eating for our goals will change. So the more insulin resistant we are, the less tolerant we can be of the various like starchy carbohydrates, because it will cause such a high insulin response. So that's where if you notice that you are eating a lot of the same foods and you're still like gaining weight over the years, but you're eating the same thing and it's confusing, it's probably because you are experiencing some level of insulin resistance that's just inevitable, that happens with age. To the degree that it'll happen will depend on each person, but it does tend to happen for most people, which is where you'll want to take a look, especially at those starches, and see which ones are going to be higher glycemic and start swapping those out for ones that are medium or lower glycemic. So especially, I'm assuming, I don't know what your goal with intermittent fasting is. If you're talking about menopause, it might be for weight loss. But if it is for gut healing, then there are the other factors that definitely still apply with the migrating motor complex. But at least in terms of weight loss, addressing the insulin resistance that tends to happen as we age is really important. Okay, I'm going to try and get one more question here because this is going a little bit longer than I usually go. Yeah. So Jamila says, "Hey Autumn, I love your channel. Thanks for the information. I'm saddened by the fact that organic foods are more expensive and so are high quality fats and high quality proteins." Yeah, you know what? It's unfortunate that the types of foods that are more supportive of goals are the ones that tend to be more expensive, but there are ways to make it so that it doesn't have to be. So, depending on where you live, I know that some people who have access to this will go in with families and buy like a whole cow and be able to have like the whole cow split between the family. And then they can then take that at a much more discounted price and freeze it and have that meat for a really long time. I'm not as familiar with that. I don't live in a place where that's as accessible, but there are options like that that can help to keep things less expensive. So one thing I really like to do, is use less expensive types of proteins earlier in the day as well, like eggs. Eggs are obviously a great source of protein. We've talked about this a lot. I have a video coming out about them soon too. But eggs are fairly inexpensive. I mean, you don't have to be having beef every day. You don't have to be having chicken or salmon, which salmon can really be expensive. You can be having things that are much less expensive and great sources of fat and protein, like eggs, or various dairy products that will help you still achieve your goals without it breaking the bank. So there are ways to go about it. Costco is another great option. I like to use a lot of various nuts and seeds, but I often will also just stick to like cottage cheese and adding on some peanut butter and some berries on that, like you guys have seen on my Instagram account lately. And that's another way to just reduce the price. You don't have to be using all of these various ingredients. You don't have to be using the most expensive options. Using the less expensive proteins is a really good way to go about it, like the eggs, like various dairy products. Excellent way to still get your protein in without having it break the bank. There are, like I mentioned, Costco, you can get, even though it's not like as high quality as if you were to get like Butcher Box, which I'm a big fan of, they are going to be generally less expensive and you can get larger amounts of it, and still at least get the proteins your body needs. I mean, if we're looking at the benefits, if you can't afford something like grass-fed, grass-finished, organic beef, at the very least, covering your nutrient needs with amino acids is crucial. So if going to Costco and getting the bulk amounts works for you, at least you are fulfilling your body's needs. And that's exactly what we want. If you can afford to direct more money to then have the grass-fed options where it's going to be more rich in vitamin K2, great. Like then go on to that. But at the very least, you can opt for the less expensive, more cost-friendly options to then at least meet your body's nutrient needs. So, eggs, just remember that's actually something you can use so often and you don't have to worry about cholesterol. I've talked about this in the past. But yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. You don't necessarily have to be doing like grass-fed, grass-finished. If you can afford that, fantastic. If not, just at least make sure that you're covering your nutrient needs, addressing satiety, addressing what your body actually needs to thrive. Okay. So great. So loves community. So someone mentioned Aldi has great prices on 100% grass-fed beef and organic veggies and fruits. Fantastic. So there's so many different options. You just have to take a look at them and maybe do a little bit of research. And one really great option for organic veggies that I've seen lately is actually going and getting frozen options. Frozen, actually, they tend to pick the veggies or even the fruits at like the peak level of when they're like the most ready. And that way you're actually freezing it, like holding it in time for when it's the most nutrient dense. So that's another good way to just, have a more cost-effective approach to your meals. And using cabbage. Cabbage is a pretty inexpensive vegetable that hasn't really been like upped in price yet. I think it's going to be, I love cabbage. It's a great cruciferous vegetable to help with liver detoxification. But it's also very cost effective and it's not like broccoli or kale where everyone knows that it's like really great for you yet. So it hasn't really started to increase in prices. So don't tell anyone, but start using cabbage. Okay, I saw a question here. Gary Taubes, Taubes. I think that's how you spell it. He has some really great researched books that you guys can check out if you're interested on like the history of how we came to the idea that calorie counting was like the best thing that you could be doing and why that's not the case. Okay, I want to answer one more question. I think I said that already, but I'm going to answer one more. Oh, Carolina. Thank you, Autumn. You are awesome. I love your healthy and sane approach. Thank you. There's a few questions on cutting calories and counting calories, and um, I want to go into this, but to give it justice, it really requires a whole live stream in itself because I want to help build the case for you because it can be such a weird concept to wrap your head around that counting calories really is not the end all. It really isn't the tool that it's made out to be by nutrition experts for years and years. I don't want to not do this topic justice by giving it like a 2-minute response. So I will do it in the future. I might even want to bring on some researchers who are studying this field to actually give you guys more context on what actual research is showing, not just what like nutrition authorities are telling you, but also what actual research is showing. So I do want to eventually do that. I really want to answer your questions on cutting calories, but I want to give it justice and I want to help build the case for you. So in the future, I will do a live stream, maybe an interview with a researcher. Stay tuned. I love cabbage. Great. Andrea, keto coffee, cheers to that. Cabbage is so like underutilized. Yeah, I just mentioned this. Any cheap sources of protein for vegetarians? Definitely eggs. I mean, that's the best one. Eggs, really, really great option. Greek yogurt, also a great option. You don't need to be using like protein powders. You can be using whole food sources. Okay. Okay, great question. So is it bad to eat Greek yogurt multiple times a week? So in other words, like, is it bad to have dairy multiple times per week? I have a video that I'm working on right now that's coming out, and it might blow a lot of your guys' minds because it's very counter to probably what you've heard a lot about dairy. But dairy is really, again, not the health demon that it has been made out to be. There's a lot of people I respect in the field of nutrition who have a lot of things right, but I think that they've also been misled on the topic of dairy. I do think that there are some people that dairy does not work out for. If you're allergic to dairy, or if you're severely lactose intolerant, or if you just really can't handle lactose, period. But dairy, there's so much research now. Again, this is something that unfortunately just doesn't reach the public for like 20, 30, 40 years after it's been well known within the field itself. But there is a lot of research showing that dairy products, especially only grass-fed, this is one where it is something that's so important to get grass-fed, is a really amazing tool for actually helping provide the nutrients that's really important for preventing heart disease. So I've talked about this here and there, but vitamin K2 actually helps to bring calcium out of the arteries that causes calcification and can lead to just a lot of issues with developing heart disease, brings it out of the arteries and into the bones. So it not only helps to make sure that you are getting healthy arteries, but also that you are getting those, the actual calcium needed to form high quality bones. So to answer your question, again, long-winded answer on like Greek yogurt multiple times per week, or in other words, dairy products multiple times per week. If you are using a high quality source, you're actually getting essentially a multivitamin with that vitamin K2 with the calcium combination. So you're actually properly using calcium in the body. And so it's actually something you can use daily if you're using especially a high quality option. This is one where I really would be hesitant on suggesting a non-grass-fed option because there's just such a difference in the types of fatty acids available. One's going to be more inflammatory, one's more anti-inflammatory, and one actually has vitamin K2. If it's not grass-fed, it actually is not going to have the level of vitamin K2, if any, in the non-grass-fed option. And remember, that's the vitamin that's so important for helping to actually direct calcium out of the arteries and into the bones. So to answer your question on like Greek yogurt multiple times per week, absolutely. If you aren't allergic, if you don't have a sensitivity to lactose, and if you're using a high quality option, by all means, you're getting a daily dose of vitamin K2. And you guys are you'll start hearing more and more about it, definitely on my channel, but probably even just in the field of nutrition in general, because it is so important to overall health and wellness for preventing osteoporosis while also helping improve heart health. So, Greek yogurt, dairy, whole topic in itself, even butter, if it's grass-fed, that's something that can blow people's minds, that butter can actually be like a healthy option if it's grass-fed. So on that note, Keto Coffee Cheers, guys. There's so many questions that I want to be able to answer right now, but a lot of them, especially related to calories, I really want to make sure I dedicate a whole video to this and that I do it justice and help actually provide information that will help build the case for you so you can see where things started and where they are now. Really important for understanding why it is that calorie counting, calorie restriction period just isn't something that's really useful for long-term health and wellness goals. Eventually, I do want to bring on someone who is more of a researcher in this field to actually talk about this and so that we can discuss this topic so you can really understand it, because it is so important to understand as a basic tenet for nutrition that just simply counting calories does not address weight loss. It really does not. It doesn't address the factor that causes weight loss or weight gain. And that in itself can be a hard one to wrap your head around. Anyone. It took me a while too. So I do want to do that one in the future. And I saw a lot of questions on that. So we will get to that. But otherwise, this is the third week for the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. So if you guys do want to join in for the last 2 weeks, just check out the description in the below, the link in the description below. We have so many amazing people participating in the challenge and such a supportive community. It's really amazing. Like, I feel so lucky that I'm surrounded by all these people that are in the AN private Facebook group and participating in the challenge. So if you guys want to join in, check out the details in the description below so that you guys can participate in the last 2 weeks. But otherwise, make sure that you're checking out or that you're actually putting in the comments below what it is that you want to see for next week. So next week is the 4th live stream. It is the last live stream for the challenge. So make sure that you're letting me know what it is that you actually want to talk about. Like I mentioned, I literally do not pick what I'm going to talk about until like Thursday before, so that I can see what it is that you guys want me to talk about and actually direct to your needs as best as possible. So today's whole idea on using intermittent fasting for longevity purposes, long-term, being able to use it and continue seeing results was a direct result of what you guys wanted to see. So make sure that you actually comment below. I read all of them. I will pull you in the Facebook group and ask you more questions as well. But if you can interact with that, so I actually get a direct feedback on what you guys want to see, that would be very helpful so that you guys can actually see more of what you want to see. But yeah, thank you guys. Keto Coffee Cheers. I still haven't finished this. I need to go finish this. And then I'm going to have my cottage cheese with berries because yum. And I'll see you guys next week. So remember, comment below if you want to join the Spring Intermittent Fasting Challenge. Also details in the description below, and you can still join in. But let me know in the comments below what it is that you want to see. Like this video if you guys like it, so I know to do more of them. All right, well, I'll see you guys next week, probably 9 a.m. PST again, but I'll let you guys know once I have all the details sorted in the community and on the Facebook group. All right, Keto Coffee Cheers, guys. Bye.